So number one, we always say if you're not using data, you're either lucky or you're wrong. And I think from a measurement and just pure play insights point of view, that can be a unifying force between different teams. When you have indisputable evidence or facts to essentially back up a viewpoint or a stance, and important to note that some of that measurement or data that you're bringing into the mix doesn't even necessarily need to be about the output or the performance of an output. It can be operational KPIs.
Welcome to Agents of Change, a podcast about the future of B2B marketing, featuring insights from executives at top agencies. I'm Danielle O'Neill with Leadtail. Let's hop on in. Hey everyone, welcome back to Agents of Change. I'm excited to have with me today Sean Tyson and Anna Zhao from Quietly. I'll let them tell you a little bit about themselves and what they do, but we've had the pleasure of working with Quietly before on a client program. We had a fantastic time. We were so thrilled to bring them back onto the podcast and get a little behind the scenes of what it is that they're doing over there. So Sean, if you want to take it away and tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Danielle, very much for having us. I'm Sean Tyson. I am the CEO of Quietly. I oversee all the work we do as a services organization, as well as some of the technology we've built behind the scenes. My background is all things Marcom, so mostly agency, about 20 years working in public relations as well as advertising, so creative media, and then worked at a digital agency where we were focusing on building software products in and of themselves, but also focusing on the social media space. So I had a hand in developing Hootsuite, the enterprise social media tool. And I've been at Quietly about 10 years now, and I've been enjoying seeing this sort of world of content marketing evolve and utilizing the skill sets we have from journalism and publishing, and really complementing everything we see within the sort of the marketing toolkit and the faculties of marketing. And so I have the privilege of working with Anna and a few of the leaders on our team to advance the field of content marketing each and every day.
Nice. And Anna, we'd love to know a little bit more about you.
Thanks, Danielle, for having me. Anna Zhao, head of Insight. So I oversee all research, measurement, and strategy work across the team, as well as the tools that we use behind the scenes to get to better insights faster, as we like to say. My background is in paid and all things performance marketing, so very much kind of connecting the dots between the measurement piece through to tangible activations, front of the house. With that being said, really touched everything across the marketing lifecycle throughout my career, and especially within my remit of bringing the tools together with the processes to enable us to do the work that we do on the Insight team. I'm really excited with a lot of the advancements happening in the content space in particular for us to essentially gain efficiencies, but also help us all work more effectively and shape better, more defensible content that really clearly ties back to achieving business objectives for our clients. So.
I love that. All right, well, let's dive into today. There's so much that's happening out there. We're having different interactions, especially in B2B space. A lot of things are changing right now. And so if for us, I think as agencies, we're able to take some of these and turn them into learnings for our own agencies. So I'd just love to hear from both of you. What are some of these different learnings that you're taking from these client interactions, and how are you really applying them to what we're doing in the agency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll go first. We learn a ton from our clients writ large. I will also say that we have the honor and the privilege of working with some category leaders in the space. And so they're always looking for the next practices in addition to emphasizing best practices. And one of the things we learned sort of at the outset was in addition to wanting to do more with less, which I think is pretty obvious, they were looking to operationalize a lot of the capabilities in-house and looking to others to help them do that. And so that's very much why we responded with a formal offering around sort of ops and helping our clients build out the people, process, and tools to do things better. So that was kind of one of the big and sort of preeminent learnings for us. Also realizing that content plays a role across a lot of different groups and organizations. It's very, very cross-functional. And so we can use some of the operational pieces to drive efficiency and collaboration between those sort of cross-divisional or cross-functional departments. And then last but not least, I'd say a big learning we've had just from our clients, but also just in the work we do, is that content operations is quite different than marketing operations. And so AI is kind of forcing us to think about this or evaluate this a little bit more formally, but we've always noticed the difference between, you know, producing creative trafficking ads versus producing shows, running a newsroom, so to speak. So from a publishing lens, which is very much our background with content and node channels, we realized that focusing on ops and focusing on content ops, moreover, is a huge opportunity. And we learned a lot of that opportunity through our clients, first and foremost.
And I just want to touch on that a little bit more, especially on the learnings from AI and some of the things you're pulling from that, because as we all know, everybody's trying to figure out how do we integrate AI more into what it is we're doing, what we're producing for clients, and really even how they're using it. So and I know this is completely off the cuff, Sean, sorry. But, just want to dig a little bit deeper into that. And what you were saying is, as far as how we have to use AI and think deeper about it. Can you
Okay, so
on that?
I'll respond with a comment around AI, and then I'll let Anna speak into how we do this across software and use cases in general. But to begin with, Quietly started as very much a software thesis. We raised money. We were building a lot of software using a lot of machine learning, a lot of natural language processing. So when we hear the word AI or the acronym AI, we smile because AI tends to conflate a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. We are practitioners, we are believers, we are all over the space, and we have used it in most cases to assist the research process to get to content ideas and then to content creation. We don't use it to author and generate copy or content, but we certainly use it to enhance the ideation process and the research process. And then we, of course, use it to quality control and make sure that it's going to be as good as it can be. But I would say that AI is something we think about a lot. We get asked it a lot because we are in the content space and our clients expect us to be experimenting and leveraging the best parts of it and ignoring the worst parts of it. And that's very much where our frameworks and our methodologies come into play around not just evaluating how AI can help us do things better, faster, smarter, but software in general. And that's where I'll pass the torch to Anna to comment on some of the rigor and some of the process we use to evaluate and ultimately implement solutions, whether it's AI or not, because that also feeds into how we're helping our clients do that themselves.
Yeah, and just jumping in on that, going back to kind of your earlier question too, Danielle, around as this new software and technology is coming into play and essentially, disrupting, for better or for worse, workflows internally, how to ensure the team is enrolled in the process throughout and we're not introducing too much change at a given time. Kind of to Sean's point, AI and AI enhanced capabilities and features has always been part of our toolkit and stack. Just because generative AI technologies have come more into the mainstream, I don't think that's fundamentally changed how we evaluate software and how we enlist our team members on using that software. So what I mean by that is I think it's important to not get distracted by kind of the new shiny thing in the market, especially now as a lot of point solutions are still proving themselves out against, tried and true platforms. Like, for example, let's look at the SEO space. There are a number of point solutions in there that we would use. And all of them too are on this mission to level up and compete in this, new AI environment. So how are you evaluating software on a biannual, annual basis through a very rigorous criteria set, regardless of if it's an AI platform or just another platform. So all of the different evaluation criteria sets around functionality, ability to satisfy use cases now and in the future, all of that would still apply. And we can adopt certain methods around experimentation or frameworks around experimentation to the point of, we always say, spend 60% of your time producing content, doing the things that are tried and true, proven. Perhaps you're dedicating 20% of your time to pure play experimentation, proving out new hypotheses, some of which might be testing out these new platforms, but putting them right up against the tried and true solutions to make sure that you're actually getting to a better point, better insights, and also a better workflow that these platforms aren't necessarily just advertising themselves to be better without actually having kind of the robust capabilities behind the scenes to really stand the test of time. So
So are you kind of doing
Yeah.
like your own internal A/B with it? Is that
Yes, definitely. And within the research and strategy context, I think it's quite easy for us to put up, let's say this is a new AI-enabled SEO platform. Put that up against a test, tried and true platform that's also enhancing their capabilities, as well as putting that up against, say, like a strategist for my team and their own manual qualitative analysis. All three of those methodologies on the same project, on the same brief, what did the results look like? And kind of as we go through that process, track, the time that we're spending, the savings potentially and extra steps in the process that we can skip or expedite from adopting one solution to another. But ultimately, how sound are the outputs in service of the client? I think that's always what it'll come back to. And that kind of provides an objective view, I think, as well, to evaluate the quality of what we're actually getting when we're trying new tools. But ensuring that we're not getting lost in the hype, if you will, around anything.
The 60-20-20, if I can jump in here, is really key on a number of levels because the AI space is it's moving so fast and there's so much progress. And this is both on the foundational LLM level, the features and functionality they're rolling out, in addition to like the point solutions that are built on top of that. And the LLMs, the efficacy of those change so quickly. And so you have to be testing and trialing and A/B testing, as you said, the Lambda stuff versus ChatGPT. And so we're constantly evaluating that. And to Anna's point, you have to exercise some level of control to actually understand if it's working or not. The other thing I'd say, getting back to more practicalities, is we have a working group, a smaller core working group that is very in the weeds on testing out new custom instructions, new tools. And we also employ an outside consultant because we wanted a third party to help us see what we can't. I mean, here I am talking about how invested we've been in AI for so long, but we did want someone to challenge our established ways of thinking, our established ways of working. So that has been quite helpful. And the working group, we spent a lot of time testing, but also debating and communicating around what we're doing and why, the benefits of that. To Anna's point, like, do we really understand the end benefit to our client and or to the client's audiences? Most importantly, how do we measure that? And then that needs to be pretty tight before you roll that out to the wider organization, so that they feel like the people who have had a hand in co-designing this and building this are confident and it becomes infectious, right? When we start to roll those things, you can see everybody's like kind of finish each other's sentences and is excited because we spent a lot of time thinking about how to manage the internal testing and preparing for the rollout internally.
Yeah, I like that. That's very cool. And I think that kind of just naturally brings itself to our next point here when we're thinking about being operationally minded within the agency side of things. So, when we think of how clients are kind of using us, we need to apply that, I think, internally with that consultative side. So when you take all of this together, how are you taking this information that you're garnering from your client interactions, your third party, having a vendor come in, a consultant come in, and then bring that into your own internal operations within Quietly?
Oh, it's a great question, Danielle. And two ways in which we really see kind of different factors being unifying forces to bring teams together as we look at enrolling them in some of these consultative or operational methodologies that we've applied for clients. So number one, we always say if you're not using data, you're either lucky or you're wrong. And I think from a measurement and just pure play insights point of view, that can be a unifying force between different teams. When you have indisputable evidence or facts to essentially back up a viewpoint or a stance, and important to note that some of that measurement or data that you're bringing into the mix doesn't even necessarily need to be about the output or the performance of an output. It can be operational KPI. So for example, if we understand that a specific working group, let's say it's the content or the creative team, have room to improve, speed to market around the ability to ship content effectively, efficiently, we can use those operational insights and KPIs as a measure of how and where there's room to fill a potential gap in the operations of the workflows that we have. So having some of those operational KPIs from a measurement lens, but also then having an understanding of, well, what's working in what we put out there creatively, the performance of those specific assets, content pieces, bring kind of both together when we're having a conversation around any operational changes that we're trying to push, can be a unifying force and bring kind of disparate teams, in particular, I think more of the creative teams with the delivery and the insights team together, because then we're all speaking the same language and looking at the same set of facts versus coming at it all from a very subjective view that might be, naturally skewed to what you care a little bit more about in each of your own operating teams. And then the other piece too on content, Sean mentioned earlier that content really plays a role in all Marcom activities because it can be anything and everything. We find that that's also a bit of a unifying force as well. Certainly on the client's end, where every working group needs content, whether it's sales, HR, even thinking about your own employer brand. That's all content materials that we're putting out there. So when we kind of contextualize some of the operational opportunities, even internally for our team through the lens of, okay, well, the content and the output needs to serve cross-functional stakeholders. So how can we better work together to identify those joint outcomes that each team is trying to achieve? That way, when we're designing anything for the team, or if one team is servicing another team internally, they fundamentally understand what, say, the creative department cares about. What are their KPIs that keep them up at night? And how can we better, in service of that, collaborate so that we're, jointly achieving our broader business outcomes? And that's very much a mentality that we take into our consultative work when it comes to improving client operations as well. Just helping them understand and noting that when we truly collaborate, it means that you really understand what your other stakeholders' KPIs are. You're not just collaborating with them, I use quotation marks, to, check a box of, okay, I understand what your priorities are, but I'm going to go away and do my own thing now and hope that it matches up to what you want.
Great.
We really
cool. That works for you, but I have a different opinion, but let's go.
Exactly.
So do you find then if you're able to get this true collaborative cooperation, working together amongst all the different departments, is that one of the ways that you think that you found to be most successful for how you're bridging those gaps? Because we know the creative side has a very different idea than analytics does. Content has a different idea. So is that where that key piece is coming in so that you can really figure out where everybody's talking the same language, but using different terms almost?
Absolutely. And going back to kind of the comment around measurement and insights, I think the more we understand what each team cares about, as we get into those creative ideation sessions or collaboration sessions together, we found what's really helpful is doing some upfront homework and prep work in advance to contextualize kind of the brief that we're trying to answer when we do come together. We always say, separation by preparation, in the sense that we don't believe in coming into a collaboration session and then setting the goals and outcomes, once the meeting kicks off. We want to know exactly what we're coming in to achieve. And also noting that where the creative and the insight teams may have natural differing opinions, we can design a brief up front for how we'll facilitate that collaboration session to factor in, okay, here's contextualizing information and insights to help the creative team better understand the guardrails in which we want to ideate. But here are also the creative considerations that we want the insight team, let's just say, to understand, so that when they're pulling in data points to help substantiate some of the ideas that arise from the collaboration session, that they're kind of already going in with the notion of, this is how the creative team thinks. These are answers. These are questions that they're going to want to answer within this collaboration session. So how can I better almost set myself in their brain space to have that discussion?
I like that. And so then if you think about it from that side, and this is kind of pulling back some of that AI conversation, Sean, that we just had a second ago, we're always introducing new tools, new technologies, as the tools change, as technologies change, we have to be adaptive to that too. So how do you introduce those into team settings? Like, hey, we have this whole new AI tool. Is that something that you're going to give them before the meeting, or are we going to during the meeting? Like, how do you find a way to really introduce these and still have that collaborative, cooperative kind of cross-agency effect?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my first comment would say that the work around the work is just as important as the work. So if we've done all this thinking to have a new tool or process to enhance the things, that's great. But figuring out how to communicate that is just as important as the thing. So we spend a lot of time preparing people. And it's funny, we're a small, agency, and we think we're pretty nimble and agile, but we do probably over index on the change management side because we're helping our clients with it. And I would say, maybe step one is just prime people for it. Hey, heads up, we're working on it, give you some visibility. We're going to have a meeting with you and we're going to start to talk about like what this looks like. But more importantly, that meeting is an opportunity for you to provide input and feedback. So it feels like they're being heard, their input is being considered. We're like enrolling them in this process. I don't want to make it sound like everything's like a workshop and we're co-designing everything, but you've got to give them an opportunity to formally input. And it doesn't just have to be in that meeting. You can have that meeting and then have a mechanism or a period of time where they can, upon reflection, share their thoughts on this new thing that's coming down the line. Where I'm really going is you have to communicate. I mean, we all know this, especially your audience. But when you think you've communicated enough, do it 5 more times because we're all busy. We're context switching. We're delivering client work. We're thinking about our own non-billable internal stuff. And if we really want to adopt and enable these new technologies, we have to be super on top of it. And I find the preparation, the communication is like just as important as the actual technology, the actual use cases that we've mapped out. So yeah, it's kind of eating our own dog food to some degree because when we're creating guidelines and we're kind of editorializing it, we're making it engaging and fun. It has to be compliant and formal. We're supporting the enterprise. But I would say that the communication, it's almost like the invisible work around the work is very, very important. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. And then the last thing I'd say is everything comes with an asterisk because this stuff is moving so fast. Hey, this is all using ChatGPT, but we're using Mistral for this, we're using Poe for this. And some of these tools, people may not even know they exist. So again, you have to communicate like, hey, there's a toolkit and here's how we evaluate said toolkit. And here's why and how and when certain tools kind of rise to the top and they would actually make their way into our workflow. It's not to distract people, but we do need to make sure they have some thought calories dedicated to like this kind of stuff so that when they do use the tool, they understand the why, they feel like they've been heard. It's not like one meeting and they're like, holy crap, I'm now using this tool. I've never used it before. Like there's a bunch of training and preparation and then reps and practice. So.
And I love that. And that kind of brings us back to like the original discussion topic here of those learnings from clients. As we know, we're all very communicative with our clients. I feel awful if I have a message from a client and it's 3 hours and I haven't responded to them yet. But then within our own teams, we tend to, okay, we'll get to that eventually. So it's one of those, do as I say, not as I do. And really trying to bring that back into the agency. And I love how Quietly has found a way to do this. And I wrote down as you were talking, Anna, love the idea of if you're not measuring, you're lucky or you're wrong. And just knowing, working with you guys, that's very much how you work within everything that you do too. So, and you touched on this a little bit, Sean, when we're thinking of that, how we're minimizing that disruption and that key collaboration piece and that communication, it's often overlooked. So you mentioned how you're introducing all of this, but is there a way within the agency, like if Anna comes to you and says, hey, Sean, I found this really cool new tool that we're not using. I've done a demo on it. This is what I think we need. And this is how I think we can use it. Do you have that internal buy-in too? And what does that look like?
Yeah, quite quickly, when we established the working group, we had rules of engagement or ways of working with that working group internally, but also how they interact with the rest of the company. So if, hey, this working group exists, newsflash, and if you got ideas or you see things out in the wild, here's how to throw them over the wall into the working group, or here's how to support or contribute into that discussion. So that was declared and communicated. And then I would say across as we roll things out, we're going to discover things in sort of in the weeds, if you will. And that always gets taken up, but we have to assign formal ownership on these things. So we have a working group and it's a committee, but we still at the end of the day have to have a single point of accountability because then people know who to go to with an idea. And then that discussion can be quite meaningful. And it can say, hey, person X, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Here's what we're going to do with that next. Or here's a parking lot where we can put that idea and we'll formally discuss it in a week or two. We're trying to create intuitive ways for all team members to know how they can contribute. And of course, it's very, very it's a meritocracy. So anyone can have any idea, can come from anywhere. And that's more cultural. That's less of a process thing, but feels pretty natural right now. And I don't know if you'd agree or if you'd have anything to add there, but that's what I would say, Danielle, to your question.
Yeah, and I mean, I echo all of what Sean's saying. I think just to get a little bit more tactical with an example, right? We will often conduct experimental sprints over the course of several sessions. So to Sean's point around with the working group, there's almost rules of engagement set up front. And within that, if I were to break it down, it's key checkpoints. As in, great, you submit an idea. This idea needs to be backed by a little bit of a needs analysis. So what does that mean? Give me the why. Why is this need surfacing? Give me the current state, and give me your hypothesis. What do you propose will change if we embark on a sprint or experiment set in and around improving this particular need or use case that you've identified? So if that's kind of the core rules of engagement up front, to even throw an idea over the wall, that forces the team to think, is this just a fleeting thought, or is this an actual issue or gap that can lead to sustained improvements in our overall workflows and how we engage one another? Great. If that idea kind of passes that initial criteria set, then we go into more formal sprint territory where for work like this, especially when we're trialing a new tool or anything like that, or new process, we do find it's helpful to set aside larger dedicated chunks of sprint time, as we call them, to go deep into one particular use case. So if there's homework up front to essentially, get the demo licenses ready, demo accounts, design the actual exercises that we would be doing in the sprint to quite objectively evaluate whether the tool will satisfy that initial use case that was identified, through to okay, well, now that you've gotten a feel and use for the tool, next steps, kind of secondary sprint session would almost be, now let's stress test that against using these tried and true tools and methodologies to answer the same use case question. And do you still feel the same about that initial gap that you've identified? So that's an example of how, we would transit our rules of engagement around that working group into very practical kind of sprint sessions to really go deep into the subject matter.
I love that. And I mean, it's fascinating for me having worked with you guys. Like, it gives us a little behind the curtain. I can see what the Wizard of Oz is doing back there. And so it's fascinating to hear. Before we finalize today, I just want to know, is there anything that Quietly is working on? Anything you guys are really excited about right now?
Oh gosh, lots. I'm hoping you can tell we're pretty enthusiastic on the space, and we don't need to sound too corporate when we're like, you got to make a business case and focusing on ops is accretive. But we really, at the end of the day, want to employ mentality of service for the audiences, and whatever we're doing should enhance that experience. And so we're pretty motivated to not necessarily interrupt our audience's attention, but to help them feel like they're benefiting and helping our clients feel like they're getting more done. I'm trying to think if that's kind of the weirdly sounds like a political answer. And I'm trying to think of like a practical thing that we could share. But the AI stuff is very, very interesting because we had been thinking about it for so long. Now it feels more real. And these use cases and the examples of this in use is really cool. I have to be careful with how much I share, like what we're doing specifically for what clients. But I would say the custom instructions, and even on Anna's team using ChatGPT, but into the Docs extension for analysis and stuff, I think is pretty nerdy and pretty exciting, at least for Anna and I. And I think it's a very, I know we're at the top of the hype curve for AI, but I think it's a very meaningful moment of transformation for the industry. And I'm excited to see where this goes. And we feel well positioned to take advantage of it, not to be at the mercy of it. So I would just say that's my first comment, and I'll let Anna say something much more eloquent and practical.
I sound like a broken record. I'd say I echo that. In a more material aspect, I think because of the AI transformation disruption happening, especially within the content space, it creates a ripe opportunity to really go deep into the content operational side of our offerings. While we've always had that in place, I think now is a time where more and more clients are looking for that type of advice because they're also navigating the same change within their teams. And if, we're working with a much larger organization, naturally things move slower. So when there are proven tool systems and methodologies that we can bring from kind of the work we've done internally and across the different client portfolios, I think that helps create structure for the clients who, know they need to change and evolve their ways of working, but don't necessarily know exactly where to start. So that would definitely be the piece that excites me as far as upcoming is, more formally getting into the content operations space and really helping our clients build out their capabilities in-house.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. I personally have gotten a ton of nuggets, and I'm sure the audience will too. So thank you, Anna. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much for having us.